There are moments in life that define who we are. They aren't necessarily the big events that everyone can see, but those silent, private ones when no one is watching. I met Eleanor on an autumn afternoon in Oak Ridge, a small coastal town where people still left their doors unlocked at night. I was 25. She was 22. Her brown hair danced in the wind as she walked down Main Street's sidewalk, carrying books against her chest. I don't believe in love at first sight, but I believe in recognition. Something in me recognized something in her, as if my soul was saying, finally you've arrived. Our story began like so many others of that time. Dates at the local cinema, walks through the park, endless conversations about dreams and fears. We married in the spring of 1964, in a small white chapel decorated with wildflowers. Eleanor wore a simple dress her mother had sewn, and I never thought her more beautiful than on that day. We built our life brick by brick. Our first house, small but cozy. The birth of our first son, Anthony, 9 months after the wedding. Then came Elizabeth and James. We watched our children grow, graduate and marry. We welcomed 7 grandchildren. We celebrated birthdays, Christmases, graduations. We faced financial difficulties, the loss of our parents, family disagreements. We grew old together, Eleanor and I. I saw her first wrinkles appear around her eyes when she smiled. She saw my hair darken to gray and then to white. Our hands, once firm and strong, became wrinkled and trembling, but they never stopped finding each other under the table during dinner. On our 60th anniversary, Eleanor gave me a photo album, so you never forget. She wrote on the first page, as if I could forget a single day by her side. 2 weeks later, she began to feel pain. Pain that she tried to hide from me. But 60 years beside someone teaches you to read the signs. The tests came, followed by the diagnosis no one wants to hear. Cancer. Terminal. Too advanced for effective treatment. We'll face this together, I promised her that night, holding her hands between mine, just as we've faced everything in our life. Eleanor smiled that smile that always lit up my world. Together, she agreed. The following months were an emotional roller coaster. Good days, when Eleanor could sit in the garden and watch the birds. Bad days, when the pain was so great that not even morphine could relieve it. Nights when I would stay awake beside her, counting her breaths, fearing that each one would be the last. It was on one of those nights, when the rain gently tapped against our window, that Eleanor asked me for something unusual. "Charles," she whispered, her voice weak but determined, "I need you to get something for me. Anything." I responded immediately. At the back of our closet, behind the winter boxes, there's a cedar chest. Bring it to me, please. I found the chest easily, although I had never noticed it before. It was small, the size of a shoebox, but heavy, made of dark wood with metal details. When I placed it on the bed, Eleanor touched it with reverence, as if it were something sacred. Her fingers, now so thin that the bones were visible beneath the skin, trembled slightly. "There's something you need to know before I go," she said, taking a small golden key from inside her pillowcase. "Something I've kept throughout our entire life together." At that moment, as the key turned in the lock and the chest opened, I had no idea that my life, the life I thought I knew so well, was about to change forever. The cedar chest sat between us on the bed, its lid now slightly ajar. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for it. Her wedding ring, once snug on her finger, now loose around her bony knuckle. "I've carried this for 60 years, Charles," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the oxygen machine. 60 years of loving you, of building our life together, all while carrying this weight. I remember thinking how strange it was that something so small could suddenly feel so significant. How many times had I reached past this box while searching for winter clothes? How many times had Eleanor opened our closet, knowing it was there waiting? Inside, I saw a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper had yellowed with age, the edges worn from handling. They were arranged chronologically, each one dated in Eleanor's neat handwriting, all addressed to someone named Michael. "Who is Michael?" I asked, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Eleanor's eyes, those beautiful hazel eyes that had looked at me with love for 6 decades, filled with tears. "He was someone I knew before you. Someone I loved." With hands that suddenly felt clumsy and old, I untied the ribbon. The letter spanned a period of just over 2 years, from 1961 to 1963. The last one was dated exactly 2 weeks before our wedding day. "Read it," Eleanor said softly. "Read the last one." I unfolded the delicate paper, careful not to tear it along its well-worn creases. Eleanor's handwriting was so familiar to me. The same handwriting that had signed countless birthday cards, written grocery lists, and penned love notes left in my lunchbox during our early years together. "My dearest Michael," I read aloud, my voice catching. "By the time you receive this letter, I will have made my decision. I cannot continue to live in this limbo, loving a man who belongs to another. Your wife and children deserve your full devotion, just as this child growing inside me deserves a father who can be present in their life." I stopped reading, the words blurring before my eyes. My heart pounded in my chest. Beneath the letters lay a small envelope containing a yellowed piece of paper, a positive pregnancy test, dated September 1963. "Charles," Eleanor's voice broke through my shock. "Please look at me." I raised my eyes to meet hers, this woman I thought I knew completely. "There's one more thing in the box," she said. At the very bottom, protected by a sleeve of tissue paper, was a photograph. Eleanor, young and radiant, her head thrown back in laughter, in the arms of a tall, dark-haired man I had never seen before. They stood on a beach I didn't recognize, waves crashing behind them, looking utterly, completely in love. "Anthony," I whispered, the realization washing over me like ice water. "Anthony isn't mine. Our firstborn. The boy who had my mother's eyes, or so I'd always thought. The child who was born premature, yet somehow robust and healthy. The son I had taught to ride a bicycle, to shave, to drive. The man who now had children of his own, grandchildren I adored. I was going to raise him alone," Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger as if unburdening herself gave her renewed energy. "I had it all planned out. I would move to my aunt's house in Portland, have the baby, find work. But then I met you, Charles." She reached for my hand. I let her take it, though I felt numb. "You were kind and steady and looked at me like I was something precious. When you proposed after only 3 months, I told myself it was a gift from the universe, a chance for my child to have a real family. You lied to me," I said, the words hanging between us like a physical thing. "Yes," she admitted, a tear sliding down her hollow cheek. "The only lie I ever told you in 60 years of marriage. I was 22, scared and in love with you, in love with the life we could have. I stood up then, needing space, needing air. The bedroom we had shared for decades suddenly felt too small, too intimate. The photographs on the walls, our wedding, our children, our life, seemed to watch me with new eyes. Did he know?" I asked, my back to her. "This Michael, did he know about Anthony?" "I told him I was pregnant in my last letter to him," Eleanor said. "He never responded. He had made his choice long before that. His wife, his legitimate children. I was a mistake he couldn't afford to acknowledge." I turned to look at her then, this woman who had been my partner through every joy and sorrow for 60 years. She looked so small in our bed, drowning in pillows and blankets, her body betraying her a little more each day. "Why tell me now, Eleanor? After all these years, why not take this to your grave?" She closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. When she opened them again, they held a resolve I recognized from every major decision she'd ever made. "Because Anthony deserves to know the truth, and because I couldn't bear the thought of leaving you with this burden alone. The choice of whether to tell him, that should be yours, but you deserve to know first." I sat back down on the edge of the bed, my mind racing through memories. Anthony's graduation, his wedding, the birth of his first child. Every milestone where I had stood proudly as his father, never questioning, never doubting. "Does he look like him?" I asked, nodding toward the photograph. Does Anthony look like Michael? Eleanor's gaze softened. Sometimes, in certain lights, I would see glimpses. The shape of his jaw, the way he laughs. But mostly Charles, he looks like you. Like me? I echoed, confused. Not in his features, she explained, reaching for my hand again. In his character, in his integrity, in the way he treats his wife, his children, the way he moves through the world with kindness and patience. Those things, the things that matter, he learned from you. I looked down at our joined hands, hers small and frail, mine spotted with age but still strong enough to hold hers. 60 years of holding these hands. 60 years of building a life together, brick by brick. What will you do now? Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper. Can you forgive me, Charles? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with 6 decades of shared history. And as I sat there, holding the hand of the woman I had loved for most of my life, I realized that I too had a secret that, in the face of her revelation and her impending departure, seemed as small and insignificant as a grain of sand. But before I could speak, before I could share my own truth, Eleanor's monitor began to beep erratically, and our moment of reckoning was interrupted by the harsh reality of her failing body. My dearest Michael, I read aloud, my voice catching. By the time you receive this letter, I will have made my decision. I cannot continue to live in this limbo, loving a man who belongs to another. Your wife and children deserve your full devotion, just as this child growing inside me deserves a father who can be present in their life. I stopped reading, the words blurring before my eyes. My heart pounded in my chest. Beneath the letters lay a small envelope containing a yellowed piece of paper, a positive pregnancy test, dated September 1963. Charles, Eleanor's voice broke through my shock. Please look at me. I raised my eyes to meet hers, this woman I thought I knew completely. There's one more thing in the box, she said. At the very bottom, protected by a sleeve of tissue paper, was a photograph. Eleanor, young and radiant, her head thrown back in laughter, in the arms of a tall, dark-haired man I had never seen before. They stood on a beach I didn't recognize, waves crashing behind them, looking utterly, completely in love. Anthony, I whispered, the realization washing over me like ice water. Anthony isn't mine. Our firstborn. The boy who had my mother's eyes. Or so I'd always thought. The child who was born premature, yet somehow robust and healthy. The son I had taught to ride a bicycle, to shave, to drive. The man who now had children of his own. Grandchildren I adored. I was going to raise him alone, Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger as if unburdening herself gave her renewed energy. I had it all planned out. I would move to my aunt's house in Portland, have the baby, find work. But then I met you, Charles. She reached for my hand. I let her take it, though I felt numb. You were kind and steady and looked at me like I was something precious. When you proposed after only 3 months, I told myself it was a gift from the universe, a chance for my child to have a real family. You lied to me, I said, the words hanging between us like a physical thing. Yes, she admitted, a tear sliding down her hollow cheek. The only lie I ever told you in 60 years of marriage. I was 22, scared and in love with you, in love with the life we could have. I stood up then, needing space, needing air. The bedroom we had shared for decades suddenly felt too small, too intimate. The photographs on the walls, our wedding, our children, our life, seemed to watch me with new eyes. Did he know? I asked, my back to her. This Michael, did he know about Anthony? I told him I was pregnant in my last letter to him. Eleanor said. He never responded. He had made his choice long before that. His wife, his legitimate children. I was a mistake he couldn't afford to acknowledge. I turned to look at her then, this woman who had been my partner through every joy and sorrow for 60 years. She looked so small in our bed, drowning in pillows and blankets, her body betraying her a little more each day. Why tell me now, Eleanor? After all these years, why not take this to your grave? She closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. When she opened them again, they held a resolve I recognized from every major decision she'd ever made. Because Anthony deserves to know the truth, and because I couldn't bear the thought of leaving you with this burden alone. The choice of whether to tell him, that should be yours, but you deserve to know first. I sat back down on the edge of the bed, my mind racing through memories. Anthony's graduation, his wedding, the birth of his first child. Every milestone where I had stood proudly as his father, never questioning, never doubting. Does he look like him? I asked, nodding toward the photograph. Does Anthony look like Michael? Eleanor's gaze softened. Sometimes, in certain lights, I would see glimpses. The shape of his jaw, the way he laughs. But mostly Charles, he looks like you. Like me? I echoed, confused. Not in his features, she explained, reaching for my hand again. In his character, in his integrity, in the way he treats his wife, his children. The way he moves through the world with kindness and patience. Those things, the things that matter, he learned from you. I looked down at our joined hands, hers small and frail, mine spotted with age but still strong enough to hold hers. 60 years of holding these hands. 60 years of building a life together, brick by brick. What will you do now? Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper. Can you forgive me, Charles? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with 6 decades of shared history. And as I sat there, holding the hand of the woman I had loved for most of my life, I realized that I too had a secret that, in the face of her revelation and her impending departure, seemed as small and insignificant as a grain of sand. But before I could speak, before I could share my own truth, Eleanor's monitor began to beep erratically, and our moment of reckoning was interrupted by the harsh reality of her failing body. I need to call the nurse, I said, reaching for the button. Eleanor gripped my wrist with surprising strength. First, tell me, can you forgive me, Charles? Before I go, I need to know. In that moment, looking into the eyes of the woman who had lied to me, but also given me a lifetime of love, I faced the most important decision of my life. The nurse came and went, adjusting Eleanor's medication, checking her vitals, speaking in that practiced tone that was both professional and compassionate. I stood by the window, watching the world continue its normal rhythm outside. Birds flying, neighbors walking dogs, mail being delivered, while inside our bedroom, time seemed suspended between heartbeats. When we were alone again, Eleanor's eyes found mine across the room. The medication had eased her pain, giving her face a momentary reprieve from the constant grimace she'd worn these past weeks. You haven't answered my question, Charles, she said softly. I moved back to her bedside, sitting in the chair that had become my second home. The letters and photograph lay scattered on the bedspread between us, physical evidence of a past I never knew existed. Before I answer, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, there's something you should know too. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of her surprise. We could read each other's expressions like favorite books. I also have a secret, I continued, the words feeling strange on my tongue after being held inside for so long. Not the same as yours, but a secret nonetheless. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet, the same worn leather wallet Eleanor had given me for our 25th anniversary. From behind my driver's license, I extracted a small, folded piece of paper that had traveled with me for decades. Do you remember our 5th anniversary? I asked, unfolding the paper carefully. Eleanor nodded, confusion evident in her eyes. We couldn't afford to go anywhere. You brought home takeout from Antonio's, and we ate on the floor of the living room because the kids had finally fallen asleep. I smiled at the memory. Yes, Anthony was 5, Elizabeth was 3, and James was just a baby. We were exhausted all the time. Money was tight, the happiest kind of tired, Eleanor whispered, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. That afternoon, before I came home with the food, I stopped at the bank. I continued, looking down at the paper in my hands. I needed to withdraw our last $20 to pay for dinner. The teller that day had been new, young, pretty, nervous about making mistakes. She'd handed me an envelope with my withdrawal slip and what I thought was $20. It wasn't until I was in my car that I realized she'd made a mistake. She gave me $200, Eleanor. 200, not 20. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. In 1969, $200 was nearly half a month's salary for us. I sat there in the parking lot, holding that money, knowing I should go back in and return it. I said, the shame of that moment's still fresh after all these years. We needed a new water heater. James needed shoes. Your winter coat was falling apart. What did you do? Eleanor asked, though I could see in her eyes that she already knew. I kept it, I admitted, the confession hanging in the air between us. I drove to Antonio's, ordered our anniversary dinner, and on the way home, I stopped at the department store and bought you that blue dress you'd been eyeing for months. Eleanor's hand moved to her throat, as if she could still feel the fabric against her skin. I love that dress. I wore it until it fell apart. You never asked how I afforded it, I said. I told myself it was just this once, that we deserved something nice, that no one would miss the money. I unfolded the paper completely, revealing the bank withdrawal slip from that day, preserved all these years as evidence of my moral failing. But that wasn't the only time, was it? Eleanor asked gently, her perception as keen as ever. I shook my head, unable to meet her eyes. No. Over the years, there were opportunities. Small amounts here and there. Office supplies from work. The extra change when a cashier made a mistake. The insurance check that was larger than the actual damage to the car. Each instance had been rationalized, justified in the moment. Each had been small enough to dismiss, yet large enough to weigh on my conscience. I kept track of every penny, I said, pulling out more slips of paper from my wallet. I always told myself I would pay it back someday. Eleanor reached for the papers with trembling fingers. $217.43. She read from my meticulous accounting. Plus interest, I added. If I were to pay it all back today, it would be over $1,000. Eleanor collected the slips, her movements slow but deliberate. Then, to my surprise, she began to tear them into tiny pieces. Eleanor, what are you? Enough, she said firmly. Enough accounting. Enough guilt. She continued shredding the evidence of my petty thefts, the paper falling like confetti onto the bedspread. You've carried this for decades, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Punishing yourself for what? For wanting to give your family nice things? For taking advantage of opportunities that presented themselves? Are you actually defending my stealing? I asked, incredulous. I'm putting it in perspective, Charles, she replied. You've spent 60 years being the most honest, hard-working man I know. You've given everything to this family. And all this time, you've been flagellating yourself over $200. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I sat, shocked by her decades-long deception about our son's paternity, while she dismissed my own secret as inconsequential. It's not the same, I said finally. What I did and what you did, they're not comparable. Aren't they? Eleanor challenged, her eyes bright with unshed tears. We both made choices we thought were best at the time. We both carried the weight of those choices. We both created a good life despite them, or perhaps because of them. I looked at the photograph again. Eleanor and Michael on that unknown beach, young and in love, unaware of the complicated future that awaited them. Then I looked at my wife now, her body ravaged by disease, but her spirit as vibrant as ever. If you had told me the truth back then, I said slowly, about Anthony, about Michael, what do you think I would have done? Eleanor considered this, her gaze drifting to the window where raindrops chased each other down the glass. I don't know, she admitted. That was why I couldn't take the risk. You might have left. You might have stayed but resented both of us forever. You might have loved us anyway. She paused. I chose not to find out. And instead, we had 60 years, I said softly. 60 beautiful, imperfect years, she agreed. With a son who adores you, who became the man he is because of you. I thought of Anthony, his integrity, his kindness, his devotion to his own family. I thought of the countless baseball games, the fishing trips, the late-night talks about girls in college and career choices. I thought of the pride I felt watching him graduate, get married, become a father himself. He is my son, I said, the realization washing over me with absolute clarity. Biology be damned, Eleanor. He is my son in every way that matters. Tears spilled down Eleanor's hollow cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, he is. I took her hand in mine. This hand I knew as well as my own. The hand that had held our children, that had wiped away tears, that had waved goodbye at bus stops and welcomed me home every evening. So what now? Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible. Will you tell him? It was the question that hung between us, heavy with implications. Anthony was 59 years old, with grown children of his own. Would knowing the truth at this stage of his life be a gift or a burden? I don't know, I answered honestly. I need time to think. Eleanor nodded, understanding as always. Time is the one thing I can't give you much of anymore, she said, a sad smile playing on her lips, as if to emphasize her point. A spasm of pain crossed her face, and she reached for the morphine pump beside the bed. I helped her press the button, watching as the medication flowed into her veins, bringing temporary relief. Rest now, I said, smoothing her thin hair away from her forehead. We don't need to decide everything tonight. Eleanor's eyes were already growing heavy, the combination of medication and exhaustion pulling her towards sleep, but her grip on my hand remained surprisingly strong. Charles, she murmured, fighting to keep her eyes open. I need to know. After everything, can you forgive me? I looked at this woman who had been my partner through every joy and sorrow for 60 years. This woman who had kept a monumental secret to protect our family. This woman who was leaving me, piece by piece, day by day. And in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something I needed to consider or deliberate upon. It was already there, had always been there, woven into the fabric of our shared life. There's nothing to forgive, Eleanor, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. Nothing at all. As she drifted into sleep, I carefully gathered the letters, the photograph, and the torn pieces of my confession, returning them to the cedar chest. Our secrets, now shared, no longer seemed to hold the same power over us. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a pale shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow across our bedroom. I didn't know then what I would tell Anthony, or if I would tell him at all. I didn't know how many more days or weeks I would have with Eleanor, but I knew with absolute certainty that the life we had built together, imperfect, complicated, and deeply human, was exactly the life I would choose again, secrets and all. Dad, Anthony's voice interrupted my thoughts as he offered me coffee in the kitchen. How are you holding up? I'm terrified, I admitted, of losing her, of what comes after. I can't imagine, he replied. 60 years together. That's a lifetime. The best lifetime, I said softly. After a moment, Anthony mentioned that Eleanor had tried to tell him something important earlier, but got too tired. Do you know what it might have been about? He asked. My heart stuttered as I faced this crossroads. Your mother and I have been talking about things we've never told you. I began carefully. Before I could continue, Elizabeth appeared, urgently calling us to Eleanor's bedside. We found Eleanor struggling to breathe, with the nurse informing us her vital signs were dropping. Eleanor asked to speak with Anthony and me alone. When everyone left, she said simply, "I don't have much time, and there's something you both need to hear." I watched my son's face as Eleanor revealed the truth about Michael and her pregnancy. When she finished, Anthony stood in shocked silence before whispering, "All these years, and you never told me." He turned away, asking me directly, "Did you know? All these years, did you know I wasn't really your son?" "No," I said firmly. "I only learned the truth 3 days ago. And now that you know, what am I to you now?" He asked, his voice raw with pain. I crossed the room to face him. "You are my son. You have always been my son. Biology be damned. I was there for every important moment of your life. If you think DNA changes any of that, then you don't know me at all." Anthony's face crumpled. "But I'm not really yours," he whispered. "You are more mine than if I had contributed nothing but genetic material," I insisted. "You are mine by choice, Anthony. Every day for nearly 60 years. Eleanor called us both to her bedside. I made mistakes, she said. Her breathing labored. But loving both of you was never one of them. She asked Anthony for forgiveness. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I need time. But I do know that I love you, Mom." Suddenly, Eleanor's condition changed dramatically. The monitors shrieked as medical staff rushed in. We gathered as a family for final moments together. Through it all, Eleanor's eyes remained fixed on mine, speaking volumes without words. Then, with one gentle exhale, she was gone. The room fell silent as afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow across Eleanor's face. In that moment of profound loss, with Eleanor's revelation still fresh, I realized we stood at a crossroads. But as I looked at my son across Eleanor's still form, I saw not just grief in his eyes, but resolve, the same resolve I'd seen in Eleanor when making difficult decisions. Whatever came next, we would face it together. They say there are stages to grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. What they don't tell you is that these stages aren't linear. They crash into you like waves, sometimes all at once, sometimes when you least expect them. In the weeks following Eleanor's funeral, I experienced every stage, often within the span of a single hour. I would wake, reaching for her, momentarily forgetting she was gone. I would set 2 places at the dinner table out of habit. I would pick up the phone to tell her something, only to remember there was no one to call. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after we laid Eleanor to rest, when Anthony called to ask if he could come over. We hadn't spoken much since the funeral, brief conversations about practical matters, a few text messages checking in. The revelation about his parentage hung between us, unaddressed but ever present. "Of course," I said, trying to keep the surprise from my voice. "I'll put on some coffee." When I opened the door, I was struck by how much Anthony had aged in just a few weeks. Gray had crept further into his beard, and new lines etched the corners of his eyes. Grief does that, accelerates time, carves itself into our faces. We sat at the kitchen table, steaming mugs between us. The same table where our family had shared thousands of meals, where homework had been completed, where Eleanor and I had paid bills and planned vacations and weathered crises large and small. "How are you holding up?" Anthony asked, studying me over the rim of his mug. "I'm managing," I replied, the answer I'd been giving everyone. "The house is too quiet, but I'm managing." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And you?" I asked. "How are you with everything?" We both knew I wasn't just asking about his grief for Eleanor. Anthony set down his mug carefully. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began. "About Mom, about you, about who I am." I waited, giving him space to gather his thoughts. "I was angry at first," he continued. "Not just about the secret, but about the timing. Why tell me when she was dying, when there was no time to process it? No chance to ask all the questions I have. She wanted to protect you," I said softly, "for as long as she could." "Protect me?" Anthony's voice rose slightly. "I'm nearly 60 years old, Dad. I have children of my own, grandchildren. I deserve to know the truth about my own identity long before now." I couldn't argue with that. "You're right," I acknowledged. You deserve the truth sooner. But try to understand, your mother made that decision out of love, not malice. Anthony ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But emotionally, he trailed off, staring into his coffee. I've been thinking about this Michael, he said finally. My biological father. Do you know anything about him? Beyond what was in the letters. I shook my head. Only what your mother told me. That he was married with children. That he chose his existing family over acknowledging you. Have you considered that he might still be alive? That I could find him? The question hung in the air between us. The thought occurred to me. I admitted. He'd be in his 80s now, if he's still living. I hired a private investigator, Anthony said, not meeting my eyes. Last week. I hope you don't take that as a rejection of you. A complicated emotion washed over me. Not quite hurt, not quite fear. What are you hoping to find? I asked carefully. Anthony looked up, his eyes filled with determination and uncertainty. I don't know exactly. Medical history, maybe. Answers. A piece of the puzzle that is me. And if you find him, what then? I don't know that either, he admitted. I might just want information. I might want to meet him. I might decide I don't want anything to do with him at all. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. But whatever I discover, whatever I decide, it doesn't change who raised me, who taught me to be a man, who loved me unconditionally for my entire life. My throat tightened with emotion. When I think about who taught me to ride a bike, it's you, Anthony continued. Who sat through every Little League game, it's you. Who helped me with my college applications, who walked me through asking Linda to marry me, who showed me how to be a father to my own children. It's you, Dad. Always you. Tears welled in my eyes. I never wanted to be anything else but your father, I said, my voice breaking. From the moment your mother placed you in my arms, you were mine. And I'm still yours, Anthony said firmly. Finding out about Michael doesn't change that. Nothing could change that. We sat in silence as sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a rainbow against the kitchen wall. There's something else, Anthony said, reaching into his pocket. Something I wanted to show you. He handed me a folded printout of an email. Dear Mr. Thornton, I read aloud. After extensive research, I regret to inform you that Michael Donovan passed away in 1987 from complications related to lung cancer. I looked up at Anthony, who said quietly, he's been gone for nearly 40 years. He never knew about me, never had the chance to reject or accept me. Are you disappointed? I asked. Anthony considered this. Yes and no. Yes, because there will always be questions now that can never be answered. No, because it simplifies things. There's no possibility of a reunion, no complex relationship to navigate. There's an address for one of his children, my half-sister, in Portland, Anthony continued. I haven't decided if I'll contact her or not. Whatever you decide, I said, I'll support you. Anthony smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen since before Eleanor's death. I know you will. You always have. He showed me the photograph of Eleanor and Michael. Mom gave this to me, he said. She told me that regardless of biology, you were the best father she could have ever hoped for. We talked for hours that morning, sharing memories of Eleanor, laughing and crying in equal measure. At noon, Elizabeth and James arrived with lunch. As we gathered around the table, I looked at my children, the family Eleanor and I had built together. Your mother was the bravest, most loving person I've ever known, I said. She made choices, some easy, some impossibly hard, to protect this family. She wasn't perfect. None of us are. But the love she had for each of you, that was perfect. That's a legacy. Later, Anthony invited me to stay with his family for a while, and I accepted. After everyone left, I found a letter from Eleanor in the cedar chest. Love is not about biology or DNA. She had written, love is about choice. Every day for 60 years, you chose me. You chose our family. The truth may change the past, but it need not change the future. I folded the letter and held it against my heart. Outside, the day was ending in colors Eleanor would have pointed out. For 60 years, I had seen the world through her eyes. Now I would have to learn to see it alone, but not entirely alone. I had our children, including Anthony. I had our grandchildren. I had the family we had built together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. 6 months after Eleanor's passing, I found myself standing on a beach I had never visited before. "This is it," Anthony said, standing beside me. "This is the beach from the photograph." I looked around at the curved shoreline, the rocky outcroppings, the distant lighthouse. Cannon Beach, Oregon, the place where Eleanor and Michael had once stood together, young and in love. "How can you be sure?" I asked, though the lighthouse was unmistakable. "Rebecca confirmed it," Anthony replied. "She recognized it immediately." Rebecca, Michael's daughter, Anthony's half-sister, had welcomed Anthony's letter with open arms. After weeks of deliberation, Anthony had decided to reach out to Michael's family, not seeking to replace the family he had, but to understand the full tapestry of his origins. Rebecca had responded within days, her email warm and shocked in equal measure. "I always felt like something was missing in our family story," she had written. "DNA tests confirmed what Eleanor's letters had already told us. Anthony and Rebecca shared a father. Our trip to Oregon had been Anthony's idea. I'd like you to come with me," he had said. "You're as much a part of this story as anyone." Standing on this beach where Eleanor had once stood, I felt her presence acutely. "It's strange," Anthony said, "standing here, knowing they stood in this same spot, before I existed, before any of us existed." Anthony took a few photographs with his phone. "Rebecca wants to meet you for dinner tonight," he said. "She says she has some of Michael's things she'd like to show us. Old photographs, letters. Apparently, he kept a journal." A complicated emotion washed over me. "Are you ready for that? To learn more about him?" Anthony turned to face me. "I think so. But it doesn't change anything, Dad. Not between us." I smiled, grateful for his reassurance. "Before we meet Rebecca," Anthony said, "there's something I want to show you." He handed me a folded piece of paper. I recognized Eleanor's handwriting immediately. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my hands trembling. "Mom gave it to me," Anthony explained. "That last day, along with the photograph. She made me promise not to show it to you until I thought you were ready." I unfolded the paper carefully. "My dearest Anthony," I read aloud, "by the time you read this, I will be gone, and you will know the truth about your biological father. But there is another truth, a greater truth, that I need you to understand. Charles, the man you have called Dad your entire life, chose you. From the moment I told him I was pregnant, before we were even married, he chose to love you as his own." I paused, gathering myself. "What you may not know, what he may never tell you himself, is that Charles knew the truth from the beginning." I stopped reading, looking up at Anthony in confusion. "Keep reading," he urged gently. "The night before our wedding, I couldn't bear the deception any longer. I showed him the letters, told him about Michael, confessed that the child I carried wasn't biologically his. Instead, he took my hands in his and made me a promise. 'This child is ours now,' he said. 'Yours and mine. No one else's.'" Tears streamed down my face. The memory Eleanor described came flooding back, a memory I had buried so deeply that I had convinced even myself it had never happened. We made a pact that night. Eleanor's letter continued, to never speak of Michael again. Charles insisted that no one, not even you, needed to know that he wasn't your biological father. I looked up at Anthony. "I don't remember," I whispered. "How could I not remember this? The human mind is a remarkable thing." Eleanor's letter continued. "Over time, Charles so fully embraced his role as your father that I believe he truly forgot our conversation that night. He became your father not just in action, but in his deepest identity." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. As I face the end of my life, I find I can no longer maintain this fiction. You deserve to know your full story. But please remember this. Charles's love for you was never a lie. It was, and is, the most genuine truth of our family. I folded the paper with trembling hands. "I don't remember," I said again. "How could I not remember something so important?" Anthony sat beside me. "The mind protects itself," he said simply. "Mom thought you had buried it so deeply that you truly forgot, that you became my father so completely that There was no room for any other narrative. But I lied to you, I said. All these months, I've been acting as if Eleanor's revelation was as much a shock to me as it was to you. Anthony shook his head. You didn't lie. Not really. You forgot. There's a difference. I stared out at the ocean. When did you read this? I asked finally. The day after Mom died, Anthony replied. I was angry at first, at both of you, for the deception. But then I realized something. What was that? I asked. That it didn't matter, he said simply. Whether you knew from the beginning or learned just before Mom died, it didn't change anything about how you raised me, how you loved me. If anything, it made your love more profound. You chose me, Dad. Twice. I felt something shift inside me. I think I do remember, I said slowly. Not clearly, but impressions. Feelings. Eleanor crying. Making a promise. Does it change anything for you? Anthony asked. Knowing that you knew, then forgot, then learned again? I considered this. No, I said with absolute certainty. It changes nothing. Except perhaps that I understand Eleanor better now. And I understand myself better too. The mind may forget, but the heart remembers. Later, at dinner with Rebecca, she placed a small box between us containing photos of Michael, letters, and his journal. As Anthony examined these artifacts of his biological father, his eyes kept returning to me. I'd like to propose a toast, Rebecca said, to family in all its forms, to the connections that bind us, whether through blood or choice or circumstance. Walking back to our hotel, Anthony put his arm around my shoulders. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For coming with me, for being open to all of this, for being my father, in every way that matters. I stopped and turned to face him. Anthony, I need you to understand something. I didn't just choose to be your father once, or even twice. I chose it every single day of your life, and I will continue to choose it every day I have left. Anthony's eyes filled with tears. I know, Dad, he said softly. I've always known. Back in my hotel room, I stood looking out at the ocean, thinking about the strange path that had brought me here. I took out Eleanor's wedding photograph. You were right, Eleanor, I whispered. The truth changed the past, but it didn't change the future. Our family is real. Our love was real. And that's the only truth that matters in the end.
If you enjoyed the story, don't miss the next ones appearing on your screen. Feel free to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to us. See you next time.